And the new president has already signed some of those executive orders. Joining me now is Joe Hockey, former Australian ambassador to the United States. Joe, good to see you. Thanks for joining us on this historic morning.
Thanks, Pete.
I made this point to Jeff Blush a short time ago. 4 years ago, Donald Trump, he talked about carnage in his inaugural speech. Today, Joe Biden spoke about unity. He said that word several times. What did you make of it?
Well, the starting point for Joe Biden is to show empathy. And he did that last night in Washington, D.C. time with an unprecedented ceremony commemorating the 400,000 Americans that lost their lives to COVID. By showing empathy, he is already showing how different he is to Donald Trump. And at this particular moment, America needs a hug. It needs the opportunity to come together, to put aside their differences. I think he referred to it as an uncivil war, and he's right. And particularly after the events of last week, there's no doubt that Joe Biden's going to be focusing on both showing empathy and undertaking empathetic decisions early on. And from his perspective, stopping construction of the wall, opening up the borders, giving the Dreamers an opportunity, a pathway to citizenship, they're the things that show he is empathetic towards the American people.
Well, what do you see as his biggest challenge?
Well, firstly, I think he's off a very strong base in being able to show empathy and getting a positive response. I mean, he's in a good position that actually the great middle ground of America wants an empathetic and caring president, and that is Joe Biden. The second challenge, of course, will be rolling out his agenda. America, well, the world's never had the twin peak challenge of a global pandemic, a health crisis, and an economic crisis. America has been hit by both at the one time. And on top of that, there is a great social divide, particularly on the basis of race. So, you know, he really has a three peaks challenge of dealing with a pandemic, dealing with an economic crisis, and, of course, dealing with the social unrest in America.
Do you believe he's the right man for this moment?
Yes, he is. You know, Donald Trump 4 years ago pledged to be a disruptor, and he was. He delivered on what he said he'd do. His behaviour at the end was reprehensible, deplorable, in fact, and it probably shouldn't have surprised us that he would go out fighting, but we never expected it'd be about encouraging, effectively, treason. And that did tremendous damage to Donald Trump. But, of course, him not turning up at the inauguration is pretty much in keeping with his persona. And he's certainly the legacy he wants to leave. Now, America had that disruption. Now it needs a period of healing. Joe Biden, with nearly 50 years of experience, is exactly the right person. Not only has he had great trauma in his life, as everyone knows, he is just sort of the wise father, grandfather that America needs at this particular point of time, backed up by a very impressive Vice President, Kamala Harris, who illustrates the new diversity of America.
There were 74 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump, though. And a majority, or a big chunk of that, I would say, will not accept this result because Donald Trump doesn't really accept this result. So what does Joe Biden do with those Republicans, those Donald Trump supporters? Does he have to heed their voices in some way to assuage their concerns?
Yes, he does. And this is a really important point you've made, Pete. It is... Joe Biden comes from blue-collar stock, and he's represented a pretty blue-collar community. And it was that blue-collar working class in key states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a handful of others that got him over the line. Now, there are two things to remember. Firstly, if you take out New York State and California, Donald Trump won a majority of the votes in the rest of America. And that only illustrates, the only thing that illustrates is the huge divide in the United States and in many ways based on geography. So Joe Biden has to reach out to the Midwest and the Deep South. And if he does that, then he's got a good chance of holding the Congress during the midterms. And this is crucial because America is never ends its election campaigning. And they've started again, this time for the 2022 midterms. Most presidents lose a majority in the House of Representatives in the first election after they're elected, so in 2022 for Joe Biden. And the face of the Democrat Party is Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, both in their 80s at the time next election. That's not the answer. So he knows he has to have a reach out to those people that have traditionally been the blue-collar workers that have backed the Democrat Party. He cannot govern for New York. He cannot govern for Hollywood. He has to govern for Pittsburgh. He has to govern for Des Moines, Iowa. He needs to govern for the battlers of America. And if he does that, he's going to shave a lot of support from Donald Trump, because Donald Trump hasn't got much in common with the 74 million people that voted for him. Let's face it. I mean, not many of those 74 million people are living in a New York skyscraper or have 19 of their own golf courses. So, Joe Biden's got more in common with Donald Trump's voters than many people realise.